Hello, and welcome. I am Roslyn Long, and I am your host of Dear Life After. I am so glad that you chose to join us on today. But you already know the drill. You still have time to do what? Tag a friend, tweet a friend, text a friend, tell them to come on over and join us live here at Dear Life After. You can reach us on Facebook Live and YouTube. Come on and join us. You still have time. Listen. So, I hope everybody is having a wonderful day, that your Saturday is starting off marvelous. So, I am so glad to be here. I'm excited about our guest on today. Listen, so I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time giving introductions because he will speak for himself. So, none other than Chief Keith Humphrey.
Hey, what's going on, Roslyn? How are you?
I'm doing wonderful on this beautiful Saturday.
It is a beautiful day.
It
It's really
is.
nice here too.
Yes. So we're not going to waste any time. We're just going to kind of jump on into it and talk about it. So I was thinking about, so you were previously the chief of Norman, Oklahoma, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so now you work in Memphis.
Yes, the University of Memphis. After all the years of your local municipal policing, I was led to campus policing, and it's been a really good experience. There's a big difference between local municipal policing and campus policing. But at the end of the day, it's a law enforcement and it's all about protecting the community.
Right. So, but Norman, Oklahoma is, and I could be incorrect, predominantly don't look like us.
No, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, Rosalind, Norman was one of the sundown towns that was located in the United States. And so I think until the late 60s, early 70s, it was against the law to be in public as an African American as far as after the sun went down. Uh, you could uh, you could be jailed or worse. So it had that history. And so for me to go and be the first African American chief of that city, I became really good friends with the first black family who moved um, into the city. Dr. George
Okay.
Nicholson and his wife Barbara are really, they've adopted us as part of their family. Amazing man. He was one of the first black professors at the University of Oklahoma, but his family was the first African American family to actually buy a home in Norman. And
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so he talks about how a white realtor sold them their home and they were harassed, and then the realtor started getting harassed to the point that they tried to run the realtor out of business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow. So, how long were you in Norman?
nearly 10 years,
Nearly 10 years.
nearly 10 years, and
So,
yeah,
during that tenure,
uh huh.
did you experience that even in this day and time?
Not as much as you would expect, but there was some. Sometimes not directly, but indirectly, being questioned a lot about qualifications and why are we doing certain things. Because anytime as an African American male, especially in the law enforcement profession, there's a lot of pushback, and especially if you come from the outside. So it always has to be labeled as an affirmative action hire, or a quota hire. It's not about your qualifications and ability to do the job. So I didn't get a lot directly because I knew how to stand up for myself. I had stood up and said myself, my reputation and my experience, had preceded me. But there was sometimes that I just had to call some things out. There was a local politician there that every opportunity he got. Matter of fact, there were a couple. every opportunity he got, he tried to belittle me and tried to make it look bad because I wasn't his choice. And so I was able to deal with that. And you have to realize first, I'm a man first, and then second. And we came to an agreement, and that stopped. And if I may, kind of tell you a story where if I may.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so we a good friend of mine who also is African American chief. Matter of fact, he's my podcast partner. We were summoned to Washington D.C. to talk about gun safety, not gun reform or anything like that. Gun safety, and we went on the platform of when someone has mental illness, there should be limitations. And when I talk about mental illness, I'm talking about your severe diagnosed mental illness, psychosis, um, you know, uh,
Schizophrenia.
schizophrenia, and things like that. I'm not
Right.
talking about the lower levels of mental illness. And so we were summoned to talk about it, and our focus was there needs to be some limitation. There needs to be a database when it comes to those who suffer from those severe forms of mental illness should not be allowed to buy weapons. And so there was a group of Oklahomans that all they heard were two black chiefs were going to Washington to speak for a predominantly liberal Congress or Senate to talk about guns. They didn't. They cut out the safety part of it. They didn't. That's all they heard, guns. So then the strong Second Amendment people came out and called for our jobs.
Oh, wow.
Basically, oh yeah, we were called the N word and things like that because they just heard Washington, the Senate at that time. President Obama was the president. Was the president. Dianne Feinstein Senator Dianne Feinstein was the chair of that committee. So there was so much hatred toward the Democratic leadership in Washington. And now you take two African American chiefs, which we were like two of five African American chiefs in the state of Oklahoma. So now you're going and now you're trying to take our guns, we got threats, got called the N word. There was a call for our terminations and things like that. But we were able to, thank God, we didn't back down, and we stood on our foundation of what we went for. So I mean, those are the type of things that I dealt with. I mean, there's a few others, but we still were able to do the job and be successful.
So that's important that you were able to do your job and be successful in it.
Yeah.
So when you come in when you encounter, let's say, our young African American gentlemen, like what advice would you give them? Because so often, now we're in a state where, like, I don't have children, but I have nephews. So I
Right.
know my sisters teach them, if you get stopped, really it's crazy, but you got to put your hands where you can see them. Don't do any sudden movements. Don't, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, what would you tell them in regards to how we got here,
Yeah.
and and how we can get from being here, so to speak?
So, Roslyn, how we got here is basically you have to look at the history of law enforcement and the foundation of law enforcement. Law enforcement was a predominantly white male profession. And so policing was used for many years as a defensive method of censoring minorities. And so the dislike I don't like to say hatred, but the dislike and distrust when it comes to law enforcement toward law enforcement has to deal with the history. When
Okay.
you look at a lot of things, especially movies like Selma, which is actual factual events, when you look at things like that, and you look at the George Floyd situation, Sandra
Mm.
Bland, we could go on and on. It just plays back into what a lot of people had said over years and years and years. So that's where the lack of trust comes. So yes, we have to have that discussion with our young African American men and women, because there's also been African American females who have been whose lives have been taken. So we have to have those discussions, and keep your hands on the steering wheel. Keep your registration and insurance on your visor. Don't make those furtive and quick gestures or movements. Pull over in a lighted parking lot, and be compliant. And I think what's happening with a lot of our young adults, when we say be compliant, they believe you're saying be passive, and that's not what's happening. It's just the facts. And so we have to do that. And I have to remember that also, Rosalind, as an African American man, that I have to do the same thing. I wear two hats. I'm fortunate to be a chief, and I'm fortunate to be an African American male. But once I pull my uniform off, I look like an average African American male to some people. And so
Mhm.
you do have to have those conversations. The main thing I try to share with young men and young women is the side of the road is not the location to have court. You'll never win that. You'll never win that. And so the more
Okay.
you comply is the better it is. Just because you get a ticket doesn't mean you're guilty. It doesn't because you sign a ticket. It doesn't mean you're guilty. It just simply means that you'll take care of that ticket. And that means take it to court. Take it to court. You'll either pay the fine, take it to court. You'll have a jury trial or a trial by the judge, or you'll plead no contest. But doesn't mean you're guilty right then and there. You still have your guilt still has to be proven. So don't argue. And those are the things that we have to teach our young black men and young black women. Have to teach that there has to be a level of respect, no matter what you feel about a law enforcement officer as a whole. Personally, they still have a job to do. And at the end of the day, when they're stopped, you're detained. They are, uh, they do control that situation. Whether we like it or not, whether we believe we're guilty or not, they are in control of that situation.
Right. Unfortunately, they're in control of that situation. So, as working when you were the chief in Norman, did you encounter your officers acting in those manners with, on stops when they were on patrol?
Oh, absolutely. We A lot of times I've had people call me um, based on the fact that they believe that they were stopped for no reason, that they were being disrespected. I will say this, Rosalind: 98% of those allegations against the officers were false. There were some that were true. There were two that just stand out right now. That one was a termination, ended up in a termination, and one ended up in a suspension. And they were very blatant, extremely blatant acts of um, being discourteous and also being at borderline racism. And so, yes, we did experience that. I experienced that in the state of Oklahoma, being stopped by one of the state troopers, and so um, it was. And I'm one of these people that I don't identify myself as a police officer because I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to get out of a ticket. If I violate the law, traffic laws, I'm going to accept that, write a ticket. Now, the one thing that I don't like, and I've expressed that, is please don't lecture me. If you're going to write me a ticket, write me a ticket. And I think that's what a lot of times our young men and young women get upset about, because they feel as though they're being talked down to or being lectured. And I've always been trained in when we conduct a traffic stop, be respectful. Introduce yourself, explain what's going on. If you're going to write the citation, and then in the traffic stop. You don't lecture people, and so those are some of the things that get us in trouble. We want to lecture people. Well, we want to curse and yell and scream at people. So Yeah, that's happened, and you may not be aware, but when I left Norman, I became the chief in Little Rock, and that's a whole different area. That's the hub of segregation and a large hub of racism.
And so, how did that experience in Little Rock different from Norman?
So Little Rock is a totally different city. Arkansas is a totally different state. There's blatant racism, blatant discrimination. Being an African American male coming in from the outside, especially competing against internal candidates, I wasn't received well there. But we made some really good moves and really good changes. And so it was a reality check that things some things haven't changed when you're a black man or woman in a leadership position. I've been called lapdog, the N word. Um, my family was harassed, was followed, video of me manipulated, because I made some serious disciplinary decisions on some people. I was harassed by the media, but I was able to do some really good things and had the support of the mayor and the majority of the community. But in that department, to the point, Rosalind, I had asked the FBI to come in and do investigation, doing civil rights investigations on two particular incidents that occurred. So
Oh, wow.
it's a different place. You have to remember that's where the Little Rock Nine established, Central High School, and so that's still remnants of that still occur, and so it was different. It was different.
And I think it's important for our younger people to understand, uh, because so often we get, like now, it's election time. So
Yeah,
we just don't, I try not to talk about, but it's reality. It's
yeah,
election time. And so often we get people saying, well, my vote doesn't matter. Neither candidate is the best choice.
yeah.
But to not vote, and again, I'm going to give a disclaimer. This is my opinion.
Right, right.
But to not vote is a vote for the opposite side, so to speak.
Well, I will tell you, Roz, I saw that in Little Rock firsthand. The mayor who hired me was the first African American elected as a mayor, and so that was a point of contention for the community. Um, they went after me because they didn't like him, and I was his first hire. They couldn't get to him directly, so they got to me, trying to ruin my reputation and things like that. My faith was enhanced while I was there, because your faith has to be extremely strong, especially being African American male or woman in a chief's position, because nobody wants you. Nobody wants you in these positions. It goes back to what I say. It's a DEI hire. It's an affirmative action hire. It's a quota hire. It's not about your qualifications, and you find yourself on a regular basis, Rosalind. Not I don't have to prove myself to anyone, but I'll give you an example. You can see someone who's white as a chief. They can make a decision, no one questions it. When you make a decision, you have to sit down and explain it for an hour why it's happening. It's the same thing that your counterpart done, no questions whatsoever. So it's it's all. And then the big thing right now in law enforcement, especially municipal law enforcement, is reverse discrimination. So if you're an African American chief, and then you make a decision, I mean, anytime there's certain people within a department that if you make a decision based on their career, then there's going to be a lawsuit filed against you for reverse discrimination, which we know there's no such thing as reverse discrimination. Discrimination is discrimination. But
Right.
that is a term that is being used in police departments that are ran by African American chiefs throughout the nation. I have a really good friend who's like a little sister to me, who's a mentee. There was an underground um, email chain that was going on when she was hired, and the things that they were able to uncover while she was there were just amazing. They harassed her family, followed her daughter. It's just crazy when you hear about And I would ask the audience to go and just do some research on what's going on with black police chiefs in the nation. I mean, they're being asked to resign. They're being criminal charges are being brought up against them. They're African American chief can get fired or leave a job under some questions, and it's difficult for them to get a job. But our counterparts can do whatever criminally, whatever, and there's some that can just turn around and get a job just like that. And what they say, well, they made a mistake. When you're an African American chief, that's your character. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
it's blatant in this profession, very blatant in this profession, that we have to be better on a daily basis, not just 10 times better, not just 100 times better, not 1,000, but 10,000 times better.
And it's crazy because we're not held to the same standards
We're not. We're not.
at all. And again, that brings me to the current election.
Right.
you
Right.
know, not the same standards at all whatsoever. And that's why it's so important that our people pay attention.
Yeah.
Like you say, do their research. It's so important, to vote. I mean,
Yeah, it
because
is.
we have these things going on in life, and like you say, you have the qualifications. You're probably 10 times more qualified than their counterparts, yet because you're an African American, they don't want you to hold the position because they can't stand it for us to have anything have any type of power.
Yeah. And we say that in its facts. I mean, I've lived there for 36 years I've been in law enforcement 36 years, and I've lived that each and every day of my career. When I was in Norman, and the city manager who hired me um, was more worried about himself than his career and his reputation than mine. And the situation I told you about it earlier regarding the going to Washington regarding gun rights, he threw me under the bus. He approved me to go. He knew why I was going, and he basically threw me under the bus. And I lost a lot of respect for him when he did that. And it's one of these things when you do stuff like that, and then you want to come back and smile in someone's face. And then behind closed doors, yeah, I understand and I support that. But when someone tells you behind closed doors, well, I have to do what I have to do to save my job, you lose respect for them.
Oh, absolutely.
And our relationship changed after that. He couldn't understand. I was very respectful, always be respectful. My anytime I encountered him, it's going to always be respectful. We had meetings, we had pleasant meetings, but in the back of my mind, I remember him saying it was better me than him, and he was going to do whatever he needed to do to protect his reputation. And like I said, for somebody to tell you, yeah, you did it, yeah, I approved it, but then, I mean, but you keep fighting, keep fighting. And Roger, this has been an amazing career for me. I've had some really good people in my life, black and white.
Mhm.
Those I've worked with, some amazing officers, and I say black and white. But also, Roslyn, on the flip side of that, I've had some African American officers who have been just as contentious and just as
Absolutely.
backstabbing as our counterparts. I mean, want to see you fail, and things like that. So I've had to be very cautious of who I have associated with, and who I
Mhm.
align myself with, because law enforcement is a cutthroat job, especially the higher you go.
And that's probably part of that strengthening the faith,
Yeah, it
in your
is. It is.
profession
It
because
is.
hey, because you already know you got to pray for for God to protect you,
You do. You do, and it's every day. Your faith has to be stronger, and you know, I think what happens is that we always talk about the uh, calm before the storm, but when you really think about it, life is really the storm before the calm, and the storm is preparing you for the calm. And I had to really sit down and um, evaluate and look at my faith where I thought my faith was strong. It really wasn't where it should have been. It was strong, but it wasn't as strong as it needed to be. And so I
Okay.
had to, on several occasions, just honestly say, God, I can't. I need your help. I'm giving it to you. And I finally was able to surrender certain things to Him. And when I did that, He showed me, you know, I pretty much figured out why, or He showed me why I was in that situation and what He had planned for me in the future.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That is amazing. So when we start talking about the gun uh, safety and the gun things, because now it's just okay. It's like wild wild west.
yeah,
And in your personal and professional opinion, do
yeah,
you think that is the cause of some of the things that are happening is because we wild wild west now?
yeah. I think it's the that guns are so readily available. I mean, I remember, when we were in high school. I remember you had two people get into a fight, two students get into a fight. That was just it. It was ended. That was over. And you didn't have drive-by shootings and things like that. And I remember where this became more prevalent was in the late '80s and '90s when there was the crack epidemic and things like that. And you start for territorial reasons, you started seeing guns, but not to the point of it is now. It's because the gun laws were pretty strong back then. I mean, you couldn't have a weapon. You couldn't have a weapon in your car you unless you had you couldn't drive with a gun in your car, unless you were
Right.
a police officer or something like that. People were getting sent to jail. The gun laws were very strict back then. And then you started seeing the concealed handgun carry, where you did have to go through and train in order to carry a gun. And then recently, over the last 5 years, a lot of states have gone to constitutional carry, which means based on the Second Amendment, um, no one you don't have to have a license or permit to carry a gun, so anyone can have a gun. So what we're seeing, Rosalind, is now we're seeing a lot of vehicle burglaries that are occurring throughout the nation, and people are searching for guns. So I break in your car, you can have your purse right in the front seat with $1,000 in it, right? But
Mhm.
we've seen where the suspects will break the window out. They'll leave the purse and the money, and they're looking for a gun. So
Oh wow.
about 47% of the vehicle burglaries out here, there's a gun stolen. There's a black market for guns. I use a gun. You use a gun in an offense. In a situation, I can get rid of that gun and get another one. Uh, there is a pipeline of weapons. Where is that pipeline? Don't know. Don't know where it starts. We do know that they are there. They're readily available. $25, $200 to get a gun. People say that's a lot of money. Well, it's not a lot of money if you are not in a position. If you're underage and you need a gun,
Mhm.
that's not a lot of money. You can find that money. So that's what's leading to it. The accessibility of weapons and the availability of weapons is what's really leading to that. And then let's talk about a lack of conflict resolution. There's no
Right.
conflict resolution in our nation. People argue, people fight, people shoot. There's nowhere people sit down, they talk, and
Mhm.
go get
Yes.
their anger out. And then let's talk about there is um, a strong level of mental illness in the nation too. And and what I mean by that,
Oh,
we know people have anxiety. We know people are depressed. People have depression. But there's a lot of people out here with that on that psychosis and schizophrenia level, and so they don't know how to correctly argue or disagree. So that's what
Absolutely.
we're seeing now. We're just seeing the accessibility of weapons, and we're seeing the fact that they're in the wrong hands. And with the constitutional carry, um, that's contributing to it.
Yes. So, in being in law enforcement, what changes have you seen since being done since the Sandra Bland's, the George Floyd's, and other people? What have you seen? What changes have been made, if any?
Yeah, there has been quite a few changes. The problem we have is there's no standardized policies in law enforcement, so consistent there's no consistent policies or procedures for police
Okay.
departments to follow throughout the nation. We have state and federal laws, but there's no standard that says this is what you'll do, this is what you won't do. So what we have seen is President Obama in 2015 convened a committee of academics, faith-based leaders, political leaders, mental health professionals, education professionals, and they developed what's called the 21st Century Policing Initiative. And one of the things that it talks about, there's 6 pillars, and 2 of the pillars that stand out are trust and legitimacy.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually 3: trust and legitimacy, and then technology. And then finally, there has been recognition that law enforcement has to have a wellness program, not physical wellness, but emotional wellness. And so we've seen those put into place throughout the nation inside police departments where there are wellness programs for officers. We've seen sensitivity training. The most I've seen is the best thing I've seen is emotional intelligence training, because what we found is that a lot of times these officers that are being hired, they don't have a level of emotional intelligence.
Okay.
So when I go to work every day, where's my emotion? Where are my emotions? Let's look at a ladder. So the lower on the ladder, the minimal emotional intelligence to have. The higher I'm on the ladder, I can understand what I need to change in order to go out and do my job professionally. So there's a focus on that. Has been a big focus on de-escalation, where
Okay.
it's not as much as, so you instead of going for your handgun quickly, tasers have been deployed, verbal communications have been deployed. There's been so many different things to show de-escalation tactics, and there are a lot of departments putting that in place. The main thing is we put in a guardian mindset instead of a warrior mindset. And so
Okay.
the guardian mindset, a lot of platforms are geared around the guardian mindset of my job is to protect people. And if I have to um, protect a person up to the level of deadly force, I know how to do so in that guardian mindset. I know that it's come to I've done everything I could do. And this is what I have to do to protect that person, protect myself. So they have that guardian mindset, that emotional intelligence mindset. So I've seen a lot of that. Um, and then the body worn cameras have really helped us a lot. And then the community engagement. So what we're seeing now is we're seeing more people reporting bad behavior of officers. And as a matter of fact, this might sound surprising to the listeners and to the audience, but we're seeing at least 65 to 70% of the complaints that are made against officers are being made by officers.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and so those are some of the changes we've seen. But Rosalind, and to the audience, that's all good. That's all good, right? But
Right.
all it takes is one incident for that to just go down the drain and people forget about the good. So we take 5 steps back. You get a
Yeah,
situation like a Sandra Bland or a Tyree Nichols here in Memphis, that knocks us back a mile. And so then we have to build up momentum to get that mile back and some additional miles.
that's true. That's true. So, what do you think? What shifted for the officers now to tell on the officers or to hold their counterparts accountable now?
So the profession has gotten such a bad rap, and rightfully so in some situations. But we've seen it as we finally see it as a profession and not just a job.
Okay.
And those officers are getting tired of being lumped into with those bad officers. So, basically it's very distracting, Rosalind, if you are trying to do your job, but you got an officer who's doing something wrong, and then then the media gets all aware, or, becomes aware of it, and this top story, it's bad on that organization. So I'm a good officer. This happens. I'm going out here encountering the community, and they're saying, I don't trust you. I don't want you in my house. You're a bad officer. And so just people, the people have integrity. There are officers. You have more officers with integrity than you have with not that don't have integrity, and so they're just getting tired of it. Its bottom line is they want to separate themselves from those individuals who are causing problems, and so they're like, "Man, I'm not going down for you. I'm not going down for you. I got a reputation. I got a family to feed. I'm not that person." There have even been officers who have just left the profession because they feel as though nobody wants them to tell. Nobody wants them to stand up. They've been harassed for telling the truth. And so it takes a really
Wow.
brave person to stand up and tell the truth, especially in this profession, because there are some departments that will blacklist you if you for standing up and being honest. I had a officer who worked for me that stood up for the right thing, and he was told by a group of officers, um, either you with the white officers or you're against the white officers. You can't have it both ways. And so you just get so you have officers that continue to fight, and you have those that are saying, I'm done, I'm out of here, I don't want to be a part of this profession.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've been in law enforcement for 36 years. So
36 years.
what is it? What is that ultimate thing that you want to accomplish uh, while being a part of law enforcement to make a difference that you still have left to do?
I think it's just really rebrand the profession and get it back to what it was when people really believed in the police, and when people voted for us to have additional equipment and voted for us to receive raises and things like that. I think the main thing is just improving the reputation. I've done everything that I could imagine. I've been so fortunate. I mean, I've been able to lead 4 departments, and you have people their entire career that can't even, don't have the opportunity to lead even one. So I've been fortunate with that. Put a lot of programs in place. Rosalind, I have 13 individuals who have worked directly for me that have gone on to be police chiefs of their own departments. And
Okay.
so I've been fortunate. I've had some good mentors and I have good support group with my family. But I think the main thing is just help the profession get back to the reputation that people expect when it comes to protecting and serving.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So there was a question that says, where do you see law enforcement in the next 5 to 10 years?
Unless we actually change, we're gonna continue to struggle with getting people to do this job. Right now, nobody wants to do this job for the most part. I mean, there's a mass exodus of officers. Either they're eligible for retirement or they're leaving, going into other professions. If we don't get a hold of what's going on, we're gonna be down more. I think you're going to see more technology, law enforcement based technology. I think you're going to see more of a possibility of a civilian, more stronger civilian role in law enforcement. Those are some things that I actually see. This is a great time, I think, for a young man or young woman to be a law enforcement. You know, it used to be a calling. It's nobody's being called anymore. And I think it
Mm,
just goes back to what's happened over the last 10 years in our nation when it comes to law enforcement, what people see. I mean, you think about it, millions of people, the whole world saw a man die in front of them, with George Floyd. I mean, there's
right.
no, you can't lie about what happened. You can't try to sugarcoat it. Yeah, millions of people see a man die and scream
Right.
for his mom and say, "I can't breathe." And you saw 4 police officers standing around this guy, so that drained the life out of a lot of people. And I don't know if y'all know this, but there is some hope. Sandra Bland's sister just became a Dallas police officer about a year ago.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know if she's still there. I know she went through training, and if she graduated, and went through training. But the hope is that the light will come on, and we'll find ways to strengthen our relationship with the minority communities and continue to build this. I mean, I've never heard of things like, the LA Police Department is down 1,000 officers. Houston Police is down 500. Dallas is down 400 to 500 officers. I remember when I got into law enforcement, one position would have 1,000 applicants. That's not the case anymore. We've done the incentive thing. I mean, there's departments that are paying applicants, young officers, $25,000 signing bonus, paying off student loans, relocation fees and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So it's not the benefits anything; it's just the culture. And so if we don't find a solution, we're going to be in trouble, and we're going to start seeing more technology based and more civilian based policing.
And so, what do you think is the ultimate answer in regards to how we can come together in regards to that?
Well, we're going to have to purge this profession, and what I mean by that, we're going to have to make some major decisions, and we have to cut our losses with some people. We have some individuals in this profession that shouldn't be law enforcement officers. Unfortunately, sometimes we are forced to keep those individuals just based on due process,
Mm,
due process policies. I mean, you can terminate someone based on civil service or due process formats. They get their jobs back. And so, even if they're wrong, when they're defended by the unions and things like that, they get their jobs back. And so sometimes some of the same problems are being retained and rehired. And so that's going to be problem. We're going to have to figure out a way of how to maintain or create a fair employment or more broad based employment on backgrounds. We can't cut corners on backgrounds. We can't cut corners on training. We have to have the right leadership, and we have to hire the right people in place. And I'll tell you another thing is the communities are going to have to start holding these elected officials accountable. So, you know, people are going to have to start holding the mayors and city managers accountable and holding the council members accountable for their police departments. And if you start doing that, I think that you might see some positive changes there.
okay. And I think that's what happens too, is a lot of people don't know where to start, maybe.
Yeah, they don't know,
They
and
don't
they
know.
don't know that you have a right. The average citizen don't know you have a right to make a complaint. The average citizen does believe that if you make a complaint, nothing's gonna happen. The average citizen. I mean, I've had this happen before. The average citizen wants an officer fired because they wrote them a ticket. Well, you can't fire someone just because they wrote a ticket. And so when you don't fire someone, then they feel as though that you're not doing anything. They're getting away with something. So there's a lot of miscommunication, Rosalind, out there regarding law enforcement and what can be done and the steps can be taken in order for uh, disciplinary issues and things like that. For instance, if you put someone on administrative leave, you can't take their pay from them. Those are agreements and contracts and things like that. I mean, you have
Right.
people on administrative leave that are still getting paid. I have no control over that. I have to follow those rules. If I don't follow those rules, then there could be some form of legal actions taken against me or the city.
Right,
There's a
right.
lot. There's a lot of components to go into how we're going to fix this.
Well, and those are some of the things that you talk about on your talk show, correct?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So thank you. Myself and Chief Virgil Green, who's a good friend of mine. I remember earlier I was talking about the incident in Oklahoma. Virgil and I are really good friends. We've been good friends for 15, well, almost 20 years. We have a podcast called You and the Law. Each Thursday night at 6 p.m. Central. It was on all the platforms, Facebook, YouTube, all the platforms that you can think of. And we just keep it real. It's insights from two African American chiefs, and we basically keep it real about what's going on in law enforcement. We don't sugarcoat it. If law enforcement messed up, we talk about it. When law enforcement does something right, we talk about that. We have different guests on that talk about experiences that they've had with law enforcement, both positive and negative. We've talked about domestic violence. We've had some domestic violence experts on. We've talked about the emotional intelligence. We've talked about the wellness of officers. We've talked about, there was one situation, we talked about a situation in Mississippi. If you haven't heard about the Goon Squad, a group of white officers who brutally beat two African American men in front of a white female, sodomized them, and then shot one in the face. And neither one of these gentlemen died, but these officers have just been sentenced to 20 and up to 50 years in prison. We talked about that. And so, topics that people may not have heard about, or things that they may have heard about, they don't really have the insight or understand. We
Okay.
talk about it. And like I said, we don't sugarcoat it. That's the main thing. You and the law. What are your rights? We talk about the traffic stops, what do's and don'ts of a traffic stop. When to do what. Driving while black. We talk about that. That is a real thing. That's not a fictional. That's
Mm,
facts. So we talk
yeah,
about this. We talk about those things, our experiences. Yeah.
yeah, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
So hopefully people will join in on your podcast
Yeah.
and listen and learn more about the law and things like that. So
Yeah.
I have a question in regards to, so let's say for instance, when there is a traffic stop.
Okay.
So when you run the person's license, what information comes up? So does that come up that that person's a felon and they had previous
No.
things going
So
on?
no, rather than what comes up is that license plate. It will come back to who the registered owner of that vehicle is. What will also come to place, it could have say that someone is wanted inside of that vehicle based on how the information of that license plate. So, case in point, say for instance, I was involved in a shooting, and they had my license plate and things like that. They're going to put that license plate in the system. Officer stops. That's going to come back with, could come back with wanted subject, armed subject, things like that. It's also going to come back if you're a registered weapon owner. So those are the type of things that they come back. And I could also come back that a person in this vehicle may have a warrant. So those are the things that that will come back.
Okay, from running their driver's license.
Running their license plates.
No,
So
what
the
about?
license plates, what's on the vehicle, and the driver's license is what gives you the right to drive a car. And when you run someone's driver's license, once you have the probable cause, reasonable suspicion to make the
Mhm.
traffic stop, once that person provides you with the driver's license, and you run that information, you'll get a little bit more, because now you're running it on that individual. Because just because that tag may say someone has a warrant, that car may
Mhm.
have been sold, and that individual may not have changed that license plate over to the new person. But driver's license are specific to that individual. So I run that driver's license. You're going to do a state check on the state database and the national database, local database, state database, national database, to determine if that person has a warrant, something like that. So that's what's going to come back. that person has a warrant. What jurisdiction is the warrant out of, what the warrant is for. So a lot of that is tied to the driver's license itself. So two different things. License plates are affixed to cars. Driver's license are what individuals have in their in their personal possession to be able to drive a vehicle. So you get a little bit more with the driver's license than you do with the license plate.
Okay, so but you don't get if that person was a previous felon or something of that nature.
Driver's license you can. Driver's license you can.
Okay,
Not
okay,
license plate.
okay, okay. So then does that determine, well, I ain't gonna say does it determine. So then as you as an officer, would that make you handle that stop differently? So you stop me.
Uh-huh.
And you probably don't even know this, and I'm a felon. So I give you my driver's license and you run it, and it comes back that I am a felon.
Well, it make me treat you differently. I think it depends on, and when I say differently, as far as the approach and things like that, you know, depending on the initial traffic stop, I don't know anything. I'm gonna approach you, introduce myself. This is why you were stopped. You have your driver's license. When I run the license, if you have an active warrant, I might step it a little bit up on the force continuum. I might have my weapon out if you have an active warrant, felony warrant for violence. Um, so it all depends on what the situation entails. Just because someone's a felon doesn't mean you're going to always pull your gun out. It does not. Just because a person doesn't sign a ticket, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're going to yank them out of the car or anything like that. So every officer has a different method of doing it, but it all depends on what that officer knows at that specific time.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but being a felon doesn't make you a bad person, because every situation is different. But it all depends on the situation at hand.
Right.
And the thing about it is, we can't. How do we say? How do I say it? You can't give and that's where we get in trouble in law enforcement. We try to give a blanket answer, and you can't, because
Right.
every situation is different. But just because you're a felon, it doesn't mean that you're going to be treated any different. That you're going to be thrown on the ground. I shouldn't say thrown on the ground, but put on the ground. You're going to have a gun pointed at you and things like that. It all depends on the nature of the incident, the actions of that individual, and what we know at that time.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So what do you know what the stats are? We know how what happens with the black man with the police and things like that. Do we know what the stats are for black women?
We don't, but because what we find, just the ones we know of, because we know that there's a lot of African American, a lot of other minorities that don't report encounters with law enforcement or bad encounters with law enforcement. They really believe nothing's going to happen. So all we can do is go by what we know. And to the audience out there, one of the most difficult things to prove in law enforcement is racial profiling, because you have to, in order to prove racial profiling, you can perceive it, you can know it, but can you prove it? Because in order to prove racial profiling, you have to prove that that officer stopped you specifically because of what you're driving, what you look like, things like that. Because if I stop you for an expired tag and you're African American, that doesn't mean I'm profiling. Now, maybe in the back of their mind they are, but that's a legitimate reason to stop someone. You can't prove racial profile. Well, let me back up. It's very difficult to prove, because you have to prove what was the intent, what's on that officer's mind. You might know it, but it's difficult. Now, what happens is you can go back and look at their history to see
Okay.
what's happening, and it might give you a more of a bigger picture that there is a problem. But then what I also tell individuals is that if I am a white officer and I'm working in a predominantly black area, that's my area, and I make traffic stops. Of course, I'm going to have majority of my stops are probably going to be African American.
Right.
But it all depends on, can you prove that person's intent? In my 36 years, and since 1990, when Royce West pushed that legislation for racial bias stopping, I've I've only known one case that I'm aware of in the departments that I've worked for, where someone has been proven that someone racially profiled someone.
Okay. Okay. This was great information. Um, it was just awesome. I really appreciate you being so very transparent and candid.
Well, Rosa,
Um,
you my girl. We went to high school together. You my girl, so I got you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I think these are things, so often people want to hear and know
yeah,
information, but they
yeah,
don't know that person to talk to. And so they feel like they're not going to get the truth.
yeah,
They're not going to
yeah.
get the real thing.
No, I'm gonna
Um,
give you the truth. And I just want to say too, before I know we the time is running down, but I want to say this again: the side of the road is not the place to have court. You'll never win that. And so if you get stopped, hands on the steering wheel, keep your paperwork. I always say above your visor if possible, but dictate or narrate what you're going to do. Okay, officer, I'm reaching over to my console, or officer, I have a weapon in the car. I'm just letting you know. I mean, you narrate what you're doing. Once
mhm.
it makes a determination that they're going to, if they're going to issue a ticket, sign the ticket. Refusing to sign the ticket doesn't is not a method of getting out of it. Just sign the ticket, and at the bottom of the ticket, it specifically says that it's not an admission of guilt. If you don't feel that you were justified in being stopped, then make a complaint. Every police department has a complaint process. You can't argue if you don't make a complaint. So make a complaint if you feel as though, and you have a right to know what happens if that complaint was investigated and what the findings of that complaint is. So those are things that I wanted to just kind of share with everyone, that you do have a right. You pay the salaries of police officers. They work for you. So you do have a right to make a complaint if you need to, and you have a right to know what's going on with that complaint.
Where do they start to file a complaint?
Any police department, you're not probably not going to readily get it to the chief, but a supervisor, or depending on the size of the department, you may have to call the chief. But you can call and say, I want to make a complaint, and about 98% of the police departments have a process. As a matter of fact, it's against policy for an officer to try to talk a citizen out of making a complaint. So you start with calling the department, asking what their complaint process is. And then also, if they feel like there's not a complaint process, Rosalind, they can always go to that elected official, being a city manager, being the mayor, being one of the city council members that represent their area. There's always a place to start, or
Okay.
the media, or the media.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
That's great information. So,
absolutely,
yeah. So we want people to make sure that they have the information they need in the event that they feel they need to file a complaint. So,
absolutely.
yeah. So again, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. So we encourage everyone, if you want to hear more about you and the law, please log on Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. uh, and just kind of hear. You'll be able to get some other good information, I'm sure. And I'm sure he would love for you to join. So
I
we
want you to
have,
come on. I want you to
yeah,
come
I'm
on.
I'm coming. I tried to find it on Thursday, and
We got you. We got you. You can
yeah,
go
I
to
was I
Facebook.
was
Our
actually at
Facebook.
vacation Bible school. So
Yeah. Our Facebook or YouTube. We're on Facebook and YouTube also.
okay, yeah, I was actually at vacation Bible school, so I kind of missed
Okay.
it.
All right.
But I'll be logged on Thursday though.
All right.
Yes, absolutely. So listen, we want you on this platform, the Lonnie B and Company Network. We have so many other great shows that you do not want to miss. On Sundays, we have Motivation Moments with Greg Bloomfield every Sunday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Come join us. Then on Monday morning, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m., we have Morning Tea with Lonnie B. Hello, hello. Then on every third Friday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, we have Time of Refreshing with Manny Cush. You don't want to miss it. And then we have Africa Restoration Movement every second and fourth Friday live. And then we have Word on Wednesday, Bible study at 7:30 p.m. You don't want to miss that as well. Then we have the Refine Conference that is coming up on next Saturday morning, July 27th at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. The special guest is our very own Miss Pamela Dawson, Grammy Award-winning Pamela Dawson. So these are some of the great shows we have. And of course, we have none other than myself, Roslyn, with Dear Life After every Saturday at 11 a.m. So go ahead and put all this on your calendar because you don't want to miss any of these marvelous shows. Again, we thank you for your time, for joining us on today. And as I always say, make it a great day on purpose.